everybody, welcome back to another Intrepid Filmographer's video. You might have already seen Nick talk about his 4 favorite films, and now we're reversing it, and Nick's going to ask me about 4 movies that are really important to me, and I'll kind of explain my thoughts on it, but I'm gonna throw it over to Nick so he can start the interrogation.
I'm going to start the interrogation. Yeah, I'm going to put you under the spotlight now. It was very, very hard for me. You seem very confident. You seem like you're going into this. Yeah, I was thinking about that closing scene in Girl Fight and how both of those characters got into the ring. And I don't know. You were definitely more, you got the Michelle Rodriguez vibes. And I definitely did not have that. So I'm going to ask you the same question you asked me. So these 4 movies, are these like your top 4 of all time? Or is this more of a kind of like, that's basically what I did. 3 and then one that, is in my top 10, but I thought was kind of an important definitive movie for me. How about you?
So this is not going to be a top 4 or even a top 3 or even a top 1 for me. My favorite movie of all time is on this list, is in these 4 movies that we're going to talk about, and I'll obviously mention that when it comes up. I really tried to look at 4 movies I thought that either had an extremely influential effect on how I think about movies and my development as far as that goes, and the movies that I think these movies all had a very important part in my life or in my development of different tastes within the movies that I like so much. So I think they kind of show the kind of scope of the kind of movies that I really connect to.
Okay. And this was easy for you to come up with 4 that did that.
It wasn't super. Like I took some. I had more than 4, and then had to pare them down. But for me, it's not about. I'll say this. I enjoy doing things like this because these 4 could change. Like this. So for right now, when I think about this is the list that I have, and I think it's a shorthand for if people are just coming to the show or just coming to hearing either one of us talk about movies for the first time, and it'll give them a pretty good idea of like a base of where I'm coming from. Because I think with critics, it's really important to understand where they're coming from to be able to judge on what you agree and what you don't agree about their critiques on things.
Oh man, I hope it did that too. Okay, so are these in any order, or can I just like? Well, how do you want to do this?
I have an order that I'm going to go in.
Okay.
So you just let me know when you want me to do the first one.
All right. Well, let's do that right now then.
Okay, we're going to start with the movie that I really can identify as the one that made me really fascinated and curious about making movies and the idea of like constructing movies to do a certain thing. And that is Scream, the original Scream, which I had to be taken to by my mother because I couldn't get into. It was an R-rated movie. I believe 1996, right, is the year that Scream came out, was released. And I had never seen a movie like it before. First of all, the playing on the genre in which it exists in was a thing I'd never seen before and would come to define a whole swath of movies and media that I would really connect to throughout my life. It's one of the things I really love when a piece of media is really able to play on other media and other things in its genre, right? But also be a really good one of those type of movies, right? I think Scream is a really effective, really tense, really engaging horror movie, as well as being a funny send-up of what horror movies are, right? It's a celebration of horror movies while also setting them up. I think that the mystery of it, the whodunit aspect of it also was so activating for me when I was that age. I started chasing that feeling of like, can I find another movie that makes me feel like this while I'm watching it? Where I really am just like constantly guessing, trying to figure out who did it, and then am honestly surprised at the end about what it was, but also feel fulfilled like it didn't come out of nowhere. Right? I don't think the franchise itself has ever ended up being able to do that ever again, right? As far as even though I really like other entries in the franchise, it's never been like this again. And there hasn't been a lot of movies that I'm able to do what this movie did and made me feel like. And it really defined a lot for me and really set me on a course of being like, wait a second, there are other people who direct movies than Steven Spielberg, right? That's kind of like what it was, And it was that age where I started like locking into who makes these movies, right? Who writes them, who directs them, should I see other things that they wrote and directed, right? So that is a big part of that.
So then you immediately went to see I Know What You Did Last Summer from Kevin Williamson.
100%.
Yeah, me too. I mean, what I love about Scream, I want to get to your second movie, but like, I felt like that was a very 90s thing, and I work with college students now, and a lot of them, like, that's their favorite movie. Like, it's had a weird shelf life. You know, the fashions, the hairstyles are very much 1996, and yet I've had a lot of them come up to me like, have you seen Scream? Like, yes, I saw it when it came out, like years before you were born, but it still is, not just because it's a franchise, but they love the original movie. So yeah, it's lived longer than I thought it would at the time. All right, then I guess where we go from there is your number 2.
My number 2 is Almost Famous, which for a long time was what I would call my favorite. I called it my favorite movie of all time, and it was for a long time. It was the first movie I think I organically came to in my head one day, just being like, somebody asked me what my favorite movie was, and I was like, I always said this, but I think it's Almost Famous. And it was just, and it was the first time I'd ever really had that feeling before, where I was like, this movie that isn't a movie that I watched a million times when I was a kid is actually the movie I think I prefer to watch more than any of these other ones, right? That I feel the most connected to. And it also represents a lot for me, obviously the Cameron Crowe movie, and his sort of incorporation of music into his movies is obviously legendary. But, you know, I love musicals, or this isn't a musical, obviously, but that incorporation of music and drama and theme all sort of tied together into one inescapable combination really connects with me, right? And, you know, the scene on the bus, or the Tiny Dancer scene, which has been obviously now parodied a lot, but that scene had such a deep effect on me, and this idea of sort of this, that music could be, you know, transcendent in a way that I really hadn't thought about before. I mean, I love music, obviously, but I'm not a musician. I'm not somebody who, that's not my first sort of like go-to thing is music. And this really gave me that feeling. And I've just loved it since I saw it in the movie theater. And it just was very important to me for those reasons. So I think that's why it's still on this list for me.
That's a good one. Again, we kind of came of age around the same time.
Yes.
And like I mentioned Magnolia when I did this, and it was like around the same year or just before or just after. And
just before, I think, but yeah.
Yeah,
very close.
and I remember saying that was my favorite, and it is. It's probably my second favorite movie, as I said, but it's like one of those things, right? Like I didn't grow up with it. I saw it, you know, as a 18-year-old or whatever I was, 17-year-old, and yeah, it's kind of cool to have that first movie that is your movie and not like your parents' generation's movie that they showed. And nothing wrong with that, because my favorite movie, it's absolutely my parents' generation movie, but it is cool to have that one sort of that is yours, that defines you.
Yeah.
All right, so what else you got? What's your number 3?
So my next would be Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. It is the first difficult movie that is dense and deep and has a lot of thematic elements happening that on the surface are not always so easy to understand when you're 13, 14, however years old. It was the first movie like that I really fell in love with and dug into. And, you know, seeing it for the first time, when you see it here, this Harrison Ford science fiction movie, you think, okay, this is going to be a rip-roaring great time. And that's not what it is, right, at all. It's this treatise on mortality and what it means to be a human being, and what are we spiraling towards as this, you know, consumer society? What is it going to turn into? What is our reliance on technology going to turn into? All of those things in this. That was something I really hadn't experienced before, or hadn't allowed myself to be open to before. And seeing this, it really unlocked that desire for me to search out more difficult things, you know, more things with more depth, and things that had, you know, more to say about society, wrapped up in genres that I really loved, right? That was the other important part too, was this idea that like this genre could be more than just like people fighting with laser swords or whatever, you know what I mean? There was different places for these things to exist. And obviously also just in general, like the look and style of it and the music really became like sedimented in my brain as like, this is what like great science fiction looks and sounds like, right? It became that in my head, right? He did that more than once. Alien is very similar in that way, is one of those things where, and I didn't really realize, I don't think, that it was a difficult movie until I was like, oh, my buddy who I always watch movies with, I was like, you should watch Blade Runner, you've never seen it. And he was like, I didn't really like it.
Yeah.
He's like, it was kind of boring. And I was like, really?
Let me ask you, did you see it like before you kind of came to that consciousness about it, or did you see it at a point where you were just like ready for it?
I saw it at a point where I was ready for it. I was in
Okay.
college when I saw it, and I saw it in a film class, basically. Not in a film class, like in a media studies class. We were
Nice.
talking about like Marshall McLuhan and like, you know, all these like media theorists people, right?
Well, you're speaking my language now.
Yeah, you know, we watched it in that class, and I was in like probably the best possible mindset to watch it, right? I was like ready for all. We also watched like Videodrome in that class, you know, so we're really diving into the weird shit, you know, at a certain point. But like that's where I saw it for the first time, and it really just imprinted on my brain. But also, you're saying another part of it that I think defines and shows who I am, and this where we're similar. Love private eye movies, love mystery movies, love hard-boiled detective fiction stuff. So it fits all of those vibes for me. So that's why it's on this list.
Okay. And that leaves you one more. So I think we're doing good so far.
Yeah.
Let's bring it home. Let's finish strong.
My last one is my favorite movie of all time, which is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. The reasons why it's my favorite movie of all time also speak to a lot of other movies that I love and a lot of things that I just cling to about movies. Fantasy, action epic, based on a book. I saw Fellowship of the Ring and was like, oh my God, I need all of this in my eyeballs right now.
Yeah.
So I like went home, bought the books, and just poured through them, basically, you know, and read them over and over and over again. In like the 3 years those movies came out, those three movies came out, I think I reread the series at least 3 times. I watched all of the movies, you know, I was watching those movies every week, basically, in the lead up to Return of the King, essentially. And watching all 3 of them once Return of the King came out, watching all 3 extended editions, you know, they were just huge parts of my life with friends. And this is the other part of it too. It's like the communal aspect of being like, there is this thing that I love and a couple of my friends love, and we watch the movies together, we talk about the movies when we're not watching the movies. That feeling, right, is something that I love and I've experienced luckily many times in my life, whether it be Lord of the Rings or whether it be the Marvel stuff, which is whether it is I love big franchise things because I love being able to talk about movies with other people, and those are the movies that most people see, right? And a lot of people who don't normally get really nerdy and geeky about movies get really nerdy and geeky about movies like this, right? These movies that really hit them. I tend to love stories about people and who are fighting against some big evil and who are in the face of overwhelming and unwinnable odds trying to do the right thing, right? And I love that story, those kind of stories. It's why I love superhero stories a lot of the time. It's why I love all this kind of stuff, because it just speaks to me in many, many ways. And I just think it's a masterclass in going, we're not going to take these 9 characters and make them 5 characters. You know, we're not going to take the 4 hobbits and make them 1 hobbit or 2 hobbits. We're going to do all of them. All the characters are going to be here. They're all going to have their stories. We're not going to shy away from the real nerdy weird shit. We're going to do it, right? And I think that was such a sea change moment in film, in popular filmmaking. The fact that these movies were so popular and so, you know, got so many awards. I just love that. I love when filmmakers love their source material and really try to get the spirit out of it. And I think Lord of the Rings is one of the best examples of that. So when I think about movies that are one of the reasons why I love movies, it's just the number one reason why. So
I think that's a great answer. I was going to say, could we maybe do Peter Jackson up to Lord of the Rings? Like everything he made until he made those?
maybe. But then I would like, but then I want to talk about Lord of the Rings.
I want to talk about Meet the Feebles. So.
I mean, I want to talk about that shit too. But I'm just saying, like, we get to the Frighteners or whatever. I'm gonna be like,
I love the Frighteners.
I love the Frighteners, but I'm gonna be like, I really want to now. Let's just talk about Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe if we do a ton of directors, the show runs for years, and we get to the point where like maybe we gotta start doing bigger directors because we're running out of the interesting like under discussed ones. Then maybe we get there.
There's a lot of directors.
There's a lot of directors.
It's going to take a while.
It's going to take a long time.
Very old by the time we get around to that, but I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Absolutely.
Well, that was enlightening. That was a lot better than what I did, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. My main goal in all of this content is to upstage you, Nick. So I really
make me look like shit, and you did it, and
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's watching. Listen to the show, review the show, and we'll see you next time. Later.